wore my happy colors, so we can start the day off.
Oh.
Hey, while you're on that note, I did not borrow this tie from Brant Will. However, he did inspire me to buy it. Thank you.
So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to have item 200 first, and then the second item is going to be item number 2, approval of disposition and development agreement with Mark and Sharon, Patricia, with Sherry Brooks, because she always goes last. So we'll let her go second
And
today.
it's Nancy filling in for Sherry, too.
Oh, Nancy, sorry.
So we're first?
You're going to go second.
Oh, second? All right.
Better than last. With that said, item 200, adopt ordinance amending the land development code and the city's local coastal program pertaining to medical marijuana dispensaries and amending the San Diego Municipal Code relating to the medical marijuana regulations for qualified patients, caregivers, and consumer cooperatives. Steve, thank you. Take it away.
Good morning. On Monday in item 200, there are 2 medical marijuana ordinances coming before council. The land use ordinance that came through the Land Use and Housing Committee, and then there's the public safety ordinance that went through the Public Safety Committee. And I'm going to be presenting the land use ordinance, and Don's going to present the public safety ordinance. So the land use ordinance would define the term medical marijuana consumer cooperative and establish a policy by which they can be permitted in the city of San Diego. The ordinance would limit cooperatives to the industrial light zone, which is IL 3-1, the industrial small lot zone, IS 1-1, and community commercial zones, which allow watchkeepers' quarters as the only permitted residential use. Those are CC 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, and CR 2-1. And then cooperatives would also be allowed in the corresponding districts within the, the corresponding zones within the plan districts. And in the staff report, there's a table that notes all of the plan districts and which ones would qualify to locate consumer cooperatives in them. And there's also maps, both citywide and district by district, in the backup. And if you have trouble reading them, you should check them out online, because I think you can blow them up and make them bigger and get a lot more detail. That those maps indicate where the appropriate zones are. So the ordinance would also make all applications for a cooperative subject to a process 4 conditional use permit. It would require that cooperatives be located at least 1,000 feet from schools, playgrounds, libraries, child care facilities, youth facilities, churches, parks, and other cooperatives. Requirements and restrictions regarding signage, security, lighting, and hours of operation would be imposed, and on-site medical consultation as an accessory would be prohibited. The ordinance has its roots in the recommendations of the Medical Marijuana Task Force. It reflects the direction that was given by the Land Use and Housing Committee and was initiated by the City Council in September. And finally, I just want to note that there's been a lot of public input into the ordinance. It's been through the code monitoring team, the Community Planners Committee, the Planning Commission. Each of these groups has recommended changes to the ordinance, and those recommendations are included in the staff report as alternatives for the council's consideration. And then I think we'll turn it over to Don to talk about the public safety ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And first off, Councilmember Emerald is the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Wanted me to just first off start out by making a statement that in the very beginning, she and Councilmember Gloria, who he was chair of the LUNH, right, as this went through there, they were committed to moving forward this whole issue to provide safe access for qualified patients to medical marijuana, and also to respond to the concerns of the communities with the proliferation of dispensaries that have shown up out there over the past few years. And that is what the objective was and still is. So on the public safety side, I just wanted to start out by saying 2 to 3 years prior, before the summer of 2009, Medical marijuana patients, caregivers, and supporters spoke regularly at City Council during public comment, asking for action by the City Council. They were especially passionate as the County of San Diego was not very helpful in implementing any procedures, and they actually avoided and litigated their responsibility under the law to provide for safe access. And Councilmember Emerald docketed this at PS and NS, basically to move the issue forward. And it was with great support from Councilmember Gloria that this has moved forward. So in July 29th of 2009, the PS and NS committee actually heard the issue of forming the task force and moved that forward to council. And then in October of 2009, the task force was formed. PS and NS then heard this issue 2 more times. One was on April 26th, and when the committee heard the report from the Medical Marijuana Task Force, they listened. They also heard from the community again at that point, and asked for some direction from the city attorney's office. And then the item was redocketed the next month, at May 26th, when the city attorney and there was direction actually to the city attorney and the IBA to look into some issues and bring back some information. Then more discussion, and the police department was also involved in this and testified. And then the Public Safety Committee actually directed the city attorney to go forward and use the Medical Marijuana Task Force recommendations in state law, and to devise an ordinance that they could bring forward, and which they did. And Councilmember Emerald asked me to thank the city attorney's office for their duty in this, in bringing this forward. City attorney's office is not any part of the policy decision on this, but they did respond to all the requests for legal analysis and advice from the committee. So, having said all of that, I would say as the former committee consultant that all of the concerns of the council members who were on the committee, and all the concerns, many of the concerns that were testified to, are addressed either in the public safety side or the land use side. And there were concerns that were expressed at both committee meetings that sort of overlapped. But the public safety side, the highlights of that are limits on permissible amounts of marijuana, limits on the number of plants that can be legally grown, prohibitions on smoking of medical marijuana in public, provides for the permitting process of medical marijuana cooperatives, requires the designation of one of the cooperative officers or managers to act as the responsible managing officer, requires all responsible persons in the collective to undergo, these are people to be working in the collective, to undergo a background check conducted by the city, that all permitting costs will be recovered by the city, that all transactions within the cooperatives would be fully documented, prohibits the cooperatives from operating for profit, limits compensation and prohibits bonuses to employees, directors, and managers for the cooperatives, prohibits persons under the age of 18 at or in any medical marijuana cooperative unless the person is a qualified patient or state identification card holder and accompanied by their parent, legal guardian, or primary caregiver who is over the age of 18. And lastly, requires that all medical marijuana edible products containing medical marijuana meet packaging and labeling requirements. And also the marijuana itself that would be required to be labeled. So that's pretty much the overview of that. I just wanted to take a moment and thank my colleague Steve Hill, because he really took the lead on this. He's been with us all along, and the person who handled this issue in our office left our office early in the year, so it kind of left us without a historical knowledge. But Steve, I just want to thank you for following through. He's the one who actually completed the report for the PS&NS committee. So with that.
And I've updated our reports that we presented to PS&NS in May, and it kind of goes through hypotheticals, different departments in the city, what their existing structures are, maybe to handle this. Also look at the fees that are charged at other cities in California. Really, implementation is up to them. So it's a big issue that at this point we don't have a plan. So that's going to probably have to be direction to the mayor to come back with that and a cost recovery fee. That said, questions? James?
Just two quick ones. Who will be there from the PD to answer questions on Monday? Will there be someone there from the PD?
Chief Solis is the one who was at PSNS. I don't know that he'll be there. I mean, that, you know.
Amy, do you want to?
that'd
I'm
be
sorry.
up to the-
Did you
My
want to?
understanding is Chief Solis is out of the office till April.
Will there be anyone from the PD there to answer
I don't
questions?
know this time.
That would be highly recommended. Just so I'm clear, the goal is to have a single ordinance that addresses the land use issues and the public safety recommendations. Or
I
will
think
they
there
two
are
separate?
two different ordinances. There's some item A and B.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
I wrote a report last May about the land use aspects, and I did forward that to council members Zaft and Albrecht since they were in office last year. If any of your council members want another copy, it is on our website. It's May 27th, 2010.
And then Mary, you released a memorandum or a report?
Yes, the report on the public safety ordinance was uploaded with the E1472, and that contains, as an attachment, the previous report that Don referred to at PSNS, as well as the report from the task force addressing the non-land use issues. So, and just to be super clear, my ordinance actually addresses two different divisions in the municipal code. It amends a current division that we have that is outdated, related to medical marijuana, and then adds a division to address the issue of cooperatives.
Other questions? Tana?
Who's going to be the staff presenting up there? Is it just going to, are both of you going to be at the staff table or?
Yeah, and I think we'll have Alex Creed with us as well, as the chair of the Medical Marijuana Task Force,
How do you spell Creek? I'm sorry.
K-R-E-I-T.
You guys can coordinate
I think it's
that.
actually pronounced correct.
Thank
Other-
you, so the clerk can say it appropriately.
Other questions? Tim?
For the benefit of all, so the direction needs to be given to the mayor as to implementation of the ordinance, because the land use ordinance currently doesn't identify which department might implement it,
It's not the land use
Yeah.
one.
but the public safety ordinance.
It's
So what would be the options that the council should consider in giving that direction to the mayor?
I don't know that we'd give direction to the mayor.
There,
You would want to request what an implementation plan is for this, and council would want to review this. The other thing is that there needs to be a discussion on the fees to make sure it's cost recoverable. In Mary's memo, it does discuss that this is okay on Prop 26, but they need to come back with that. And I'll just give you some context. The Sheriff's Department of the county approved their medical marijuana cooperatives, and they put them out in unincorporated areas. But their fees are through the Sheriff's Department, and it's about $11,000 annually a year.
I think that includes the land use permitting.
Yeah.
Does the updated IDA report deal with the fees?
Yeah, I have the
So
sheriff's.
that's what.
Yeah, I could give some examples of what other jurisdictions are doing as far
But
as.
you don't suggest any fees, or?
No, because we need to know what staff time's going to be. So, and we can't predict that. So we need to know if it's development services or the treasurer's office. I mean, they need to tell us, and they need to bring that forward to council.
Was there outreach to those departments from PSNS to today? Because
We
that
have,
was sort of the
we have
situation.
talked, yeah, we have talked to the departments, and we've included possible existing infrastructure, but as I said, the mayor needs to say, or staff needs to say, this is what we're going to do.
Steve, at Planning Commission, a lot of the opposition, from what I recall, was about the land use regulations and where they can and cannot operate. Was there any opposition to the public safety recommendations and that ordinance? Or was the opposition focused solely on the land use regulations?
At the Planning Commission, it was solely on the land use issues. That's
That's the
the
only
only
ordinance I have in
ordinance
front.
that.
Yeah, that's all they consider.
That's all they consider.
Yeah, the public safety ordinance was just published.
Okay.
And the public safety ordinance wasn't required to go through the other process that the land use one was. And just by way of follow-up to Jeff's comments, should the mayor identify a particular department that's going to implement or regulate, there may need to be tweaks to, and likely will need to be some tweaks to the public safety ordinance based on the regulatory body.
And just to follow up with that, James, there were a lot of comments at both of the meetings, not only from the public, but also from the council members on the committee. The city attorney did a great job of answering the questions and then incorporating what the concerns were in the final product.
Any other questions?
On the land use ordinance, one of the planning commission recommendations was that the, as I understand it, that the council consider an amendment that would prohibit the collectives from locating within 1,000 feet of colleges. Did you analyze that to determine whether that would make any difference with respect to the major colleges?
I have done analysis on that. None of the qualifying zones are within 1,000 feet of any of the major colleges or universities. But you know, just to refresh everyone's recollection, the council, when this was initiated in September, voted specifically on whether or not to include colleges and universities in the as a use requiring 1,000-foot buffer, and they voted that down. So, you know, with the recommendations of the planning commission as well as the recommendations of the community planners or the code monitoring team, none of those recommendations have been included in the ordinance. They're included in the staff report as options that the council might want to consider. But since this was really initiated by council, it was, you know, written at the direction of Land Use and Housing Committee. The ordinance really doesn't reflect any of those other suggestions.
Should that amendment be adopted by the council, this is more of a legal question, would there be any way to make that amendment exclusive to major colleges and universities, or would it apply to any college, regardless of whether it's private and what size it would be?
Well, it depends on what the motion is. Also, depending on what the changes requested by council are, we may need to come back with reintroduce the ordinance. So.
Yeah, if they want to go back, would that require a motion to reconsider? Since it was voted down 3 to 4.
You'd have to bring that up.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I mean, it's before them for introduction, so they can introduce it as it's written. They can request changes, and it may need to come back for reintroduction, depending on how extensive those changes are. But reconsideration is easy.
Questions? All right, thank you all. Next up, item number 2.